the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We all have opinions, and we all make arguments in support of those opinions. But not all arguments are created equal. When it comes to winning an argument, that can take several forms. Now, first of all, you have debate, which is sort of a formalized public speaking competition where you engage in rational discussion. Then you have rhetoric, which uses sort of clever linguistic devices to achieve its ends. But these days, on social media and all the talking heads on TV, they seem to think that if you speak louder and more quickly than everybody else, and if you get in the last word, then you quote-unquote win the argument. Now, Socrates, way back in the day, concluded that more important than winning an argument was getting at the truth. And in ancient Greece, when philosophers got together and they tried to use reason-based arguments to arrive at the truth, they called that using the dialectic. Socrates came up with a dialectic system that revolved around a thesis, an antithesis, and then the synthesis. So let's just take a quick example. So one possible thesis might be, gee, I think Facebook is a great place to connect with friends and family. And the antithesis or the antithesis would be, no, our rights and privacy as a society have eroded with services like Facebook. So by combining those two, you arrive at a synthesis. Let's try again. The absolute value of Facebook is quite complicated. Now, for a conclusion to be true, two things have to be present. Number one, the premises must be true, and number two, the reasoning must be valid. Okay, two things. Premises have to be true, reasoning has to be valid. Now we're going to look at a few examples where one of those are missing. In the first case, let's look at false premise. If it's snowing, it's Christmas morning. That's premise one. Premise two, it is snowing. So our conclusion, therefore, it is Christmas morning. Now the reasoning of that is valid. It's valid reasoning, but the first premise is incorrect. Let's take another peek at that. If it's snowing, it's Christmas morning. Obviously that is a false premise. But assuming that the premises are true, the reasoning is valid and the conclusion would be true if the premises were true. Now the second example is a bit more insidious because in that case, all the premises are true and the conclusion is true, but the reasoning is faulty, it's invalid. Let's take a peek. All successful actors are public figures. That's premise one. Premise two, Tom Hanks is a public figure. Conclusion, therefore Tom Hanks is a successful actor. The conclusion is true, the premises are true, however, the logic is faulty. And it's easy to see here when we replace one name for another. So let's try it again with a different name. All successful actors are public figures. Barack Obama is a public figure. Therefore, Barack Obama is a successful actor. See, in this case, the conclusion is false once we change one of the terms. So this is a lot more insidious to sort of ferret out, especially when you're dealing with a complex argument like immigration, tax reform, education, environment policy, gun control. When you're dealing with an issue like that and people make arguments like this where everything is true and the conclusion is true, and then they change some of the variables and then infer the truth of the conclusion, it can be very difficult to suss out real valid logic and conclusions from fake ones. Now, let's take one more example, and this is what you most often see on social media and in TV with the talking heads. If you boil their arguments down, it usually has both false premises and invalid logic. Let's take a look. All Democrats are stupid. I'm a Republican, so all my beliefs are correct. Therefore, your argument is wrong. Now, When you boil it away, that is the substance of most arguments that you're going to see in various places. And of course, then that's not even worth mentioning. And of all the billions of posts on Facebook that really take that basic tack, do you know how many of those are convincing? Zero. Do you know how many people change their mind as a result of an argument like that? Zero. You and I are in the business of winning hearts and minds. And how do you do that? With compelling argument, not by casting aspersions at others and denigrating others' beliefs and others' points of view. But it's about getting at the truth. Now, there are a lot of invalid types of reasoning, and we call these fallacies, and we've actually looked at a couple so far. Now, there are two types of fallacies. There are formal fallacies, and this is where the form of the argument itself is faulty, usually with an invalid reference to a premise. And a great example is the following. No one goes to that bar anymore. Well, why not? It's too crowded. I love that, Yogi Berra. Now, informal fallacies usually involve something a bit more insidious that works its way into the discussion, and those can be a little bit harder to suss out. And a good example of that would be, I took my anti-elephant pill today, and I've taken it every day for the last month. I haven't seen one elephant yet, so the pills must be working. Now, again, when you talk about anti-elephant pills, it's very easy to understand where that logic falls to the ground. But again, when you get into more complex issues, those types of arguments can be more difficult to see through. Some of these fallacies are inadvertently mixed up with a given argument. Other times they're intentionally injected into an argument which would otherwise be too weak to stand on its own. We're going to look at various forms of fallacies and how to very quickly identify and determine what those are. So whether you're listening to politicians or lawyers or teachers or parents or kids or whomever you're speaking with, and you hear an argument being made, you're going to be able to reduce that argument to a basic form and figure out if a fallacy exists, and if so, where it falls to the ground. But the takeaway here is you can have a true argument that is invalid, and those are the insidious ones. But you can also have a valid argument which is untrue. And we're going to look at all of these in the next few videos.